So what we're going to see now is how to deal with files in Python. Okay, so I have this little file here which has apples, comma 13.99, bananas, comma 9.99, milk, comma 3.76. Okay, so these can be items that I bought and the prices that I bought them at. Okay, and this file, look where I'm saving it. I'm going to save it as expenses.csv, and I'm going to save it into this reading files directory. Okay, it's going to ask me to replace the old one. Yes. So now what I want to do is I'm going to create a new file, a new Python program here, okay, that is going to read that file and add all the values. Okay, so the first thing to read the file is I'm going to have, it's usually a good practice to do it this way. Your F for file will be open, and then I'm going to type the name of that file. I think it was expenses.csv. I'm going to read this file. Okay, I can also put comma and then a little r here to indicate that I'm reading that file. But if you don't put it, it assumes that I'm reading that file. So F is I open this file for reading. Okay. Now, once I open it, I will, for example, consume it as a string. Okay, as one string. So the file string will be f.read. The read method actually goes to the file, reads the whole file, and puts it as a string and returns a string. So I'm assigning that string to that variable. And then I'm just going to print fstr. What this program should do is it opens the file, reads it as one string, and then prints whatever contents were there. Now, it is very important here I put the name of the file only, right? This assumes that I'm going to save this Python file in the same place where I have my expenses.csv file. If that's not the case, then I would have to put the whole path in here. I would have to go, I don't know, users, and then whatever my path is. Or if you're in Windows, you would have to do C, you always escape backslash. So you would have to do C, users, and then whatever your user is, and so on and so forth. So you can put the path to the file and the file name, or you can just put the file name, granted that we are saving this file in the same directory, the same folder where this file lives. So I'm going to save that. We'll save it as, and I am going to save it in this reading files directory because that's where my expenses file is. And I'm going to call this add expense.csv. Okay, I'll save it there. So what I'm going to do here is in my shell, I'm going to go to that file. It's file reading files, I think. Reading files. Now I'm here. I'm going to look at the contents of this directory, and I see there's the add expense CSV file and my expenses CSV file. So let's run my add expense. This is not add expense.csv. This should be a Python file. So I'm going to save it with the extension py, add expense py. So I'll run it, add expense.py, and it printed the file. It printed the contents of the file. That was all we wanted. Now let's manipulate this. So it is very important that in this variable we already have the contents of the file as a string, because then I can use string manipulation. So one thing that I can do, for example, is to create an array where each line is an array here. Okay, so for example, I'll have lines. It's going to be my string, and I will split the character new line. Every file, when you hit enter, it doesn't just, the cursor just doesn't go down one line, but it actually inserts a character that prints as one line down and all the way to the left. So, and that's the new line character, and this is how we interpret this character. It's the same in Java too, and other most popular languages. So lines will be that, and then I can access, and I can say, for example, just print the second line, which will be lines sub 1, right? So I'm going to print lines sub 1. I will save this and run it. Remember, I read it, I read it, and then as a string, I split it. I made it into a list of lines. And then I just printed the second element of that list. Remember, they started with element 0. This is why 1 is the second. And here I printed that. I can print the whole list. So if I say print lines, and then here's the list that it prints. It's a list in which each item of the list is exactly one line. Now, in order to add all these values, what I need is that each line I need to extract just this part here, just this part. And notice that the name of the item and the price of the item is separated by a comma. This is what's called a comma separated file. So what I'm going to do is for each line, for each of these lines, I'm going to split it in a comma, so then I'll have an array with, and I'll have a list with the name and the price, and I will just be adding the prices. So let's do that. I have the lines, and then what I'm going to do is for each line, so for each variable transaction in lines, so for each transaction in these lines, I'm going to have a couple of fields, right? The name and the price. So fields are going to be the transactions.split, and I will split them in a comma, right? And then look at what's going to happen. I can print fields, say just print the prices. I'm going to print fields sub 1, because if field sub 0 should be the name, field sub 1, because I'm splitting the comma, should be the second value, which is the prices. I'm just going to save that and run it. You see that I now only display the prices. Now these prices come as a string. I need to make them into a number, okay? And because they're numbers with decimals, there's this little function float that will actually convert them to a number. In the printout, you might not notice the difference because it prints the same, but when I do this, I have a string. With this, I make it into a number. So, excuse me, I will put an accumulator here, so total, that will start at 0, and then at each iteration, I'm going to say total, and this is syntax sugar for Python, plus equals. That means the total is going to be increased by the equivalent numeric value of this field sub 1. And then what I will do is I will print the total outside of the for loop, okay? Just to print the whole thing. So there it goes, and the total is 2774, which is the addition of all these things, right? You can then, try this, add this at home, but this is the addition. And we've manipulated a file, okay? Now, there's one more thing that I want to say in files that have to do more with lists than with files, but it's appropriate here. It is that because that each line is going to be splitting into two items, the name and the value, you can actually assign two variables here right away, because you know that this command is going to produce an array, a list of size 2. So you can say right here, you can say name and price. And then you just use the price, okay, for total. If you just do this, assuming that this will always split the list in two fields, each item is going to be split in 2 fields. The first is going to go here, the second one is going to go here, okay? And this makes it very easy in Python 2. So I run it, and of course it got 2774. And I can even say here, just so you make sure that this is happening, I can say print processing and then the name. This is another way of printing stuff with a comma in between. So let's do that. It says processing apples, processing bananas, processing milk, and then the total, right? This is a much better way to write a program. It's very readable. So this is going to split in 2 fields. One's going to be the name, the other one's going to be the price, and then I'm going to be accumulating the price just to print the total. And this came from a file. This is the main thing. Now let's output this processing and the total to a file, because we've been reading the file. Now we're going to output to a file. So we're going to create a file here. We're going to call it O for output. It's going to be open, and what's going to be this file name? Well, outexpenses.txt, for example. Okay. Now, when I open a file like this, I'm opening it for reading. So I need to do comma and a W to open a file for writing. And then instead of printing here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say o.write processing, say plus name. There are other ways to concatenate strings and to assemble strings. I'm not going to go over them in this tutorial, but you can read more about them. It's a way to format strings. And then I'm going to enter a new line here. So I'm going to write, for my file, I'm going to write processing and then the name of the file at each iteration. And after that, I'm going to insert an enter character. Otherwise, it won't be inserted. It will be all in one line. And then at the very end, I'm going to output write the total. And then it's very important that I do this. I close the file. I can also close my other file, my reading file too. Okay? So, here we go. I run this program. Oops. The total is a number. The write only takes strings. So what I can do for this is to do this. Just like I converted something, a string to float, I can do str to convert a number to a float. This name was always a string. I never converted it, so it's all okay. So let's do that again. And then, obviously I had no output because I have no prints in my code. But let's look at the file that it generated. If I go File Open, I will see that I'll go to my Python, wherever it was that I was working, and look at this. I have outx.txt, and here are the contents: processing apple, processing bananas, processing milk, and then the total. Okay, I can open it just for you guys to see. See, this is my output. So we've read the output from a file, and we've read the input from a file, and we wrote to the output. In the next video, I'm going to do something like counting words, where we're going to put a lot of our concepts together.